Okay, so we're going to talk about spiritual development. This is something that's very important in that we get from yoga, and but it's constant across religions. Any various kinds of treatment for addiction and mental health, they, at some level, if they're effective treatments, they have to be growing you in a spiritual way. So there are stages of spiritual development, and my team, me and my team, we're doing a big book study of ourselves. Every week we're reading a chapter of the big book of AA, and we're working through it ourselves as a way to learn. And what is AA? It's a spiritual remedy for a disease of alcoholism. And they formatted it, they figured it out, and they found that similar things work for cocaine, similar things work for gambling, similar things work for the other conditions, similar things work for eating disorders and other psychiatric conditions, because spiritual development works for everything, right? It has to. So, but one of the questions that came from that was, why are they so disconnected from spirituality? Why do people have a hard time progressing? Why do they start and then stop and are afraid to go back into it? If society was spiritual, we wouldn't have a war in Ukraine. If society was spiritual, we wouldn't have all this like greed and crazy stuff happening everywhere, shootings and stuff. There's clearly a mass separation. And so what we're talking about is the concept of stages. So spiritual development has stages. And this comes from yoga, but it's helpful to understand the different levels of spiritual development. And so it goes like this. So there is Saram Pod. This is kind of like beginning. So, you go to a yoga class and you're like, yeah, it's kind of cool. And you're testing, you're sampling, you're reading, this is nice, interesting. It's novel. So, novelty. So you're kind of, you're curious. You're learning. And then comes something called Karmpad. This is kind of when you've found some teacher or a teaching, and this can apply to religion, it can apply to a priest, it can apply to any teachings, teacher, dead or alive, whatever. You got a new thing, and you're deepening your relationships, and this is Karmpad. This is apprenticeship. So you are building, so now you're going to yoga and you're regular with it, you're growing. Or you're going to church and you're starting the Bible study, or you're going to AA, you're going to the meetings, you're engaging with the material. You're building, going to Gurdwara and reacquainting yourself with it, and it feels good, and it feels like you're seeing the benefits. And then there is something called Shaktipad, which is what we're going to talk about. And this is when you get blocked. Any development that you do, whether it's with a therapist, we go through all these stages. And there comes a point at which you say, this is crazy. You say, this is a cult. You say, this is You find everything wrong with the teacher. You say, they're doing this wrong, they're that wrong, and you just say no. And then you leave. That's a stage called Shaktipad. And if you continue, then it's Sahajpad. So now you continue, now you understand, you've worked through your blocks, and now you're in a regular way, you're committing to the growth. You're getting into the deep parts of it. And then if you, so we'll call this authentic growth. And then last thing is Satpad. And this is what they call mastery. So, this is when you get it. You're good. Here's how it works. Spirituality is needed to heal any mental problem. Addiction or mental, there's a spiritual disconnect. And like I'm a trauma therapist, right? I work in the mind, we kind of figure out stuff, and even with that work, what are we doing? We're in some way, shape, or form, we're connecting someone back with their sources of power inside them. No one else can heal you. I just want someone to listen to my story. Actually, you need to listen to your own story. But you sometimes need some help facilitating that. That's what a therapist is for. Ultimately, you need to learn you. But what trauma does, it just pushes you away from other parts of you. And that process of getting back together, that's a spiritual process. And because it's a spiritual process, you end up going through these things. So when people, they start in recovery, a lot of people, they come to Nam. Oh yeah, Nam's cool. Yeah, I like this kind of, it's like yoga, and it's kind of, breathing, and all these like Eastern, Western things, and it seems nice. It seems novel. Some people, one person was like, ugh, that's too Eastern for me, man. I just kind of need something standard. That's true. That's good. So not everybody makes it. So once you get past the novelty, once you get past the feels kind of good because it's new, because it's different, because it's not whatever you don't like. A lot of people are like, I don't like 12-step programs. They're like God and all these things. They just, We're kind of spiritual here too. It's like there's a big painting out there that's like talks about spirituality, but it's more palatable. So they get through the novelty of it. And then they start doing the work. They start coming to the day program. They start coming every day. They start learning, and it's like, oh yeah, feel the growth. You learn all these tools and skills. You don't feel as cravings as much. But there's something that you need to understand about spiritual growth, and this is why I'm talking today. It's a very short point, but it's very important. And it is basically spiritual growth is like this. You start out as like a block, and a block doesn't do very well as a human. So somehow, some process needs to happen to carve a human out of the block. Okay? A block, and you want like a nice human sculpture, right? That's what everybody wants. They want to have good boundaries. They want to have cravings. They want to be able to manage stress without relapsing to drugs. They want to have relationships that aren't like codependent and stressful and right? They want all that. They want to be all at peace and they want to be able to zen out and have a calm mind. They want all that. They want to be off the drugs, antidepressants. So this is what they want. They want to go from being a block. What is a block? A block is rough. A block is unpolished. A block is undefined or poorly defined. A block is not well situated to live the life of a human. A block trying to live the life of a human will have a lot of stress. Because life of a block is the life of a block. Rigid. Can't adapt. Frozen. Cold. All of these things. The life of a block. And if that's good for the life of a block, we need blocks in life. But if you would be a human, you need to shed the control, you need to shed the rigidity, you need to shed the processes that are making that happen. Because that's not your destiny. Your highest potential is not, in the East we say that it is divine grace that you have the body of a human. A human can choose. No other animal can choose. We can say, I do this, I do that. No other human can say. Or no other animal or plant. Now we know of, okay? ETs, I don't know. But the it's an incredible gift of choice. But with all the baggage, all the difficult childhood, all the trauma, all the things, it makes you into a block. And so if you would like to enjoy the benefits of recovery, you have to understand that this doesn't come for free. Can the block turn into a human without some chisel action? Is the block just going to chisel itself? Lots of blocks try. But you need perspective. You need to be something outside of you because you don't know what you need. That's one of the biggest things in medicine, right? Oh, I know what I need. Or doctors are taught the patients know what they need. And it's true. The patients do know what they need. To some extent. But if they really knew what they needed, they wouldn't be a block. If they had what they needed since they were a child, the yogi, he would talk about his childhood. His childhood was unusual. He would say, yeah, I started learning about relationships and codependency when I was like 7 years old. This is just what's taught. He's a man, so he learned about relationships with women. He learned about how that works. He learned about ways to harmonize a marriage when he was 7. What do all of you learn when you're 7? Lots of stuff, but probably not that. And probably don't get modeled that in your parents. So then what turns us into a block is this lot of stress, a lot of difficulty, and not knowing how to navigate it. It's not your fault. But there's a process, and that process involves stages. So let's say someone is chiseling. There's like a chisel point, right? And there's like a hammer. Polish. Does the human like it?
Not every time.
You know what? It's going to take some time to learn to love that, right? Let's be honest. If someone's going at you First of all, it should hurt. But what ends up happening is the more we do it, the more we build this thing called resentment. Just watch. You have a teacher, and they're trying to tell you things about how this relationship, maybe it's not that great for you. And then you all of a sudden start noticing how, he's like overweight himself, and he's always late, and he's, or she's like, talking about this other thing, and you start picking faults in the teacher or the teachings, right? And you begin to resist it. And that's what happens in these stages. Initially, it's all novel, because you hear about the benefits of transforming. So it's like, yeah, let's do it. And then as you progress, you start working on it, and you see how deep it starts to go. The resistance starts to well up. In AA, they have step 1, 2, and 3. Everybody's gung-ho, comes and, step 1, admitted we were powerless over alcohol. Step 2, we came willing to look at, the God thing. Step 3, ask God to help us. And then all of a sudden, the room doesn't have too many people when it goes to step 4. Because all of a sudden, we did a more fearless moral inventory. When it comes time to clean all the stuff that's making you a block, the room empties, and there's very few people who are interested. Because ultimately, but it's not like they're going to say this. They're not going to be like, hey, yeah, it's a little bit too much for me. Yeah, I wish that's what they would say. Sometimes they do, but most people, what they end up saying is yeah, 12-step programs don't work. Religion doesn't work. If religion works, we wouldn't have a lot of wars and all these other things. The spiritual teacher is like, we find a million reasons to leave the path. Because the path is hard. It generates a resentment. If I have one strength, it's that I can learn from imperfect teachers. Other than the really greats, right? Like the gurus or the Jesuses and the Buddhas and the great people, anything other than that is imperfect. And as a result, you have to learn to leave the bad and take the good. Hard to do when you're carrying a lot of resentment from someone who's trying to instruct you in how to change your deep ways. Because the process of going from a block to a human involves pain. It involves sacrifice, blood, sweat, and tears. When I was learning about things, I was like, the yoga teacher, she would instruct on do Sat Kriya like this, and I was reading my own thing, and I was like, no, I'm going to do it like this in the class. I would just, she never said anything. She just a couple of months later, I asked her hey, is this okay? It's I've been seeing you do this, and it's actually not good for you, but today you ask, and I'll tell you. But in my head, I was like, oh, I know more than her. I know more. You start doing these funny things in your head. And that's what creates this Shaktipad. And this Shaktipad is when most people leave the path. They don't leave forever, because there's millions of spiritual people and things and paths out there. You leave and you come back. There's a talk on nexuses. But the thing is, you can increase your chances of progressing if you remember that this is automatically going to happen. You have a sponsor who's taking you through the steps, doctor, healer, you're reading a book, and suddenly the book is seeming not great to you. It could very well, you're being asked to do deep change and you don't like it. And you'll find a million rationalities. But if you know this is going to happen, No teacher can be perfect. I do trauma therapy. You can't heal trauma therapy without having some break where a patient is like, "You betrayed me. I thought you said you'd be on time." Well, I had one person. I was like, "Okay, I have an issue with being late. That is true. Everyone knows that. I struggle to be on time for much." And if you've been traumatized with people not being on time for you, and it's a fair reaction. So she actually left the therapy. It's a thing. Now, what I'm going to try to tell you is that yes, people can be re-traumatized by things, but more likely the reason someone would leave productive therapy otherwise is inside resentment is building, resistance is building as we're doing deep change work. If you don't think it's happening, you're just not feeling it. You're not aware of it. But it'll hit you at some point. And what will allow you to get and stay on some kind of path is the ability to deal with this and to know that, yeah, you know what, blocks hurt. Yeah, maybe the teachers, there's some things the teachers shouldn't do. Teachers do not sleep with their patients or their students. Teachers do not, engage in weird arrangements, sex cults, things that's out there. So in AA there's the 13th step, right? These things are out there. These are things to avoid, but they're not everywhere, and they're certainly not in every path. We're talking about religion and the decline of spirituality in these days. A lot of it relates to, my parents were religious and they were jerks, and so I'm not going to do religion because my parents were jerks. It's not great logic, but it's powerful though when that's what you are deeply feeling and you were programmed that way. But if the question is why are so few people religious and spiritual these days, despite obvious benefits from these things, it's because of this. And this, it always happens. It always happens because resentment builds whenever we're being asked to do deep change. If you know what's going to happen, find out something to do with your resentments. Go talk to somebody. Talk to the teacher. Talk to the person. Maybe they have some ideas. Acknowledge it. Don't let it well up until you until it's too much and it drives you from, building yourself authentically and achieving some degree of mastery over whatever you're trying to work on, whether that's sobriety from alcohol or something like that. So, summary of simple lecture today, but blocks has all the symptoms of mental health and addiction. Nobody wants those. So you want to be a human and you want to do all this stuff, but don't just remember there's a cost. The cost is blood, sweat, and tears, and that produces resentment, and resentment will take you away from the path if you let it. And if you've done that lots in the past, you can choose any new, teachers are a dime a dozen. There's lots of people lots of places there's so many teachers out there. There's so many teachings. There's internet, Google, anything. So much. Great. But you're all going to have the same problem, though. No matter what the teaching, no matter what the teacher, no matter what the religion, no matter what the spirituality, it's all going to want to take the blockhead that you are and turn you into a human that's worthy of respect. And I include myself in this. I'm the best of blockheads. I'm honest about it though. So as long as you remember that this is how it actually works, so all those people out there who don't think they have a problem, who don't think they have an addiction, they're just a little depressed or a little anxious, it's the same thing. But you know what? When you're not looking at death, when you're not looking at losing everything in your life because of what weight you carry, it's just not worth it. So you stay stuck. But you know what? If you eat an extra bunch of potato chips, police doesn't come get you. You could be miserable your whole life, but the police isn't going to come get you. No one's going to do an intervention. No one's, right? But that doesn't change the fact that most of society is rigid. Most of society is controlling. Most of society is miserable and could benefit from transformation. But it's the people who are sick with severe addiction, mental health, or situations that are not sustainable, that they have the reason to do the work. And those are the people that need to understand that this happens. And it's okay. I call it the 5-second rule. I didn't make this. But let yourself feel whatever for 5 seconds. So if mom says something to you, and you just I hate mom. Ah! But like a lot of people, they just like, I can't hate mom. But everyone has a complicated relationship with mom. Feel it for 5 seconds. Acknowledge it's there, yeah, you know what. And then go on with your day. Deal with it. Mom-dad issues are central to what causes problems in people. So, that's comments or questions about this before we conclude? It's a little short today. Helpful?
Oh yeah.
Good. And we'll leave it at that for today.